And then they brought me this life, and this life was not as optimum as the first one would have been, but it was pretty good. And it was good enough. It was good for the purposes, but I just knew that it wasn't quite as optimal as the first one would have been. And I reviewed this life in incredible detail, like millions and millions of possibilities. It was like a flow chart. Language is so limiting here, okay? But it was like a vast flow chart of millions of branches, energetic branches. And it was like if you took a tree and laid it on its side and started at the trunk and worked your way out to the branches. It was like that, except these were probabilities, like there were paths that were more or less probable. And the thing that made them more or less probable and that could affect their outcome is free will, my choice making and the choice making of everybody else in the whole simulation. It was all a part of it. But
I love these conversations. These are my favorite.
good.
Okay, today my guest is Christian Sundberg. And you guys, on a scale of 1 to 10, I am an 11 excited to talk to Christian because it was over 3 years ago that I encountered an interview, unlike any interview I had ever heard before, where he was talking with Mira Kelly. He's going to tell a little bit of an abridged version of his story today because we have so many questions I want to be able to ask him. But Christian has also written a book called A Walk in the Physical, which I have read and I highly, highly recommend. And I'm going to share a way at the end that you can even get it for free. So Christian, welcome. I am so excited to have you here. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Thank you. So Christian, I'm going to let you just go ahead and tell your story in whatever way you would like to share it, because Christian is very unusual that he remembers his pre-birth prior to coming to this earthly incarnation. He remembers many things about his soul before his incarnation on earth. And I'm just excited for him to tell the story.
Sure. Thank you. So like you said, I'll try to be brief because it's a long story. But before I start, I also want to say that words cannot possibly articulate what I'm going to attempt to say. That's really important to say up front as a disclaimer, because words are form. They're symbols that belong to our local context, and they're based in the assumptions of our context here on Earth, like linear time and discrete location and all these things that we take for granted. Our language is based on that world, and we transcend it fully. So there is just no way that any language, any utterance can possibly touch our higher natures or the higher spiritual context from which we come. So I have to say that first. Okay, so my body is 42 years old right now. So when I was 30 years old, I took up a long-term meditation practice. And much to my surprise, after several months of meditating, I began to have non-physical experiences, out-of-body experiences. And I also began to have pre-birth memory return to me. I remember choosing this life and why, and it was just like the most normal thing in the world to have this come back to me. It was like someone had just blown leaves off of the ground and there was the grass. It was just so normal, unexceptional, and yet it was so powerful. So I'll try to share like just at a high level, but again, it's just so impossible to put into words. So I remember long ago, and when I say long ago, I mean like eons and eons ago, and yet simultaneously right now, I know that sounds strange, but this memory is like a living state of being almost that occurred so far in the past and yet is occurring now, of coming across a being who had been physical. And this is before I had any physical incarnations. And I was deeply, deeply inspired by the quality of his nature, his essence, who he was, like what he was. And I was like, my goodness, because in that state of being, you can feel and share all of our natures are telepathically exchanged and shared because we are ultimately one. So even as we're individuated, we feel and know, what it is to be the other person in ourselves too, because they're a part of us. And so I asked him telepathically, oh my goodness, how did you become this? Do you feel as much joy and freedom and power as I feel that you feel? And he shared, yes. And I felt in him all this amazing depth of being, this quality of being. And I said, my goodness, what could you possibly have done to be this and to experience this? And well, he shared many things, but one of the things he shared was that he had been physical. And he shared one physical experience in particular in which he had been suffering from a long-term illness or some kind of pain that stuck with him for many years. And the quality with which he met that pain and that limitation allowed a certain refinement of his being. I don't know how else to describe it. And I was so inspired. I said, I want to do that. I want to do that. And, and at first he kind of brushed me off almost, like not in a negative way, but yeah, that's what they all say. You don't know how hard this is hard in a way that you just don't understand. You just haven't been exposed to this yet. You just don't understand what this means. I said, no, I mean it. I want to do this. And he said, well, go talk to your guides. So I did. And I don't have right after that, but I know I lived many times after that experience. And okay, so but then the majority of this pre-birth memory is of a time somewhat immediately preceding this life, or I had lived before, I had taken a long break. And I remember this guide coming to me over and over again and asking me if I was ready to go back yet. Are you ready to go back yet? Are you ready to go back yet? Just every once in a while, and just responding, no, I'm not ready. Like being hesitant to, end a long weekend or something. I don't know. I mean, it's a bad analogy, but like I was just not ready yet. And eventually I said, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready now. And I reviewed with this guide what I can only describe as my state, like who I am and who I've been, and like the qualities that I know. I don't want to say like possess, it's not like that, but there are areas that I have experienced and grown and integrated and evolved, and others that I had not. But there was really one obvious thing that I could see, just very matter of fact, that I needed to work on. I don't like the words work on either, because that makes it sound like it's like a to-do list or something. It's not like that. But I could see that there was this profound opportunity for growth and expansion in one certain direction that before had bested me and overcome me. And the best way I can describe it is it was a specific fear that in the past had overcome me, and there was a lifetime that it had overcome me, and I had become a very egoic person, and I had damaged many others in that experience. And so I could see even from there, like the depth of the lowness of the vibration of this fear was so low that I was like, is it even possible? Is it even possible to integrate a vibration that's that low, to really integrate and come to a state of being and integrate a state of being that's that low? And I was shown yes, and you have all of time available to you to do so. There's no hurry. And I just knew in my being, well, if it can be done, I'll do it. If it can be done, I will do it. Like I just knew my strength, my immortality, my freedom, my power, my life. I knew it could be done, which sounds strange to the human part of me sometimes, knowing what I've experienced. But anyway, so I knew that was an incredible opportunity. So they brought me a life that was appropriate for that intention, to meet that fear and to integrate that low vibration. And I reviewed that life and I accepted that life. And then I accepted what we call the veil, which is just a term for the limitations in consciousness space that go along with being incarnated and having a body. And this is so hard to describe, but it's like wearing a cloak or something that erases all of your memory, and it makes you feel disconnected from all knowing and disconnected from everything else. And I like to describe it like a shift in vibration down from a very, very high state of being down to a low state. If you had an amplifier, or maybe that's not the right term, but some box that produces a pitch, and it's and then you turn down the turn on the dial, down to the bottom, and then when you get to the bottom, you turn some more, lower, and then more, and then turns to more. That's how it felt in the body of my awareness, to go from this state of incredibly high vibration down, lower, into this state of being that felt like arriving to a vacuum, like the vacuum of space, and yet simultaneously very dense and small and just incredibly dense. So I had that experience for this lifetime I'm describing, but it wasn't this lifetime. It was just before this. And I arrived there, and within moments, I was like, I am not doing this. There is no flipping way I am going to endure this. This vibration is so low. I don't feel like myself. I've lost everything. And I had a whole bunch of fear rise up. I just had so much fear. So I summoned my might and I smote the veil. I smote the limitations and I fought my way back out. And I became aware that I had killed the fetus that was to be my body. I had a life review. I could see how the fear that I had acted upon and brought into that experience affected not only the mother who was in grief, but hundreds of other people, like in ripples away from the mother, whose journeys all were made more difficult because of my fear. And like I had all these great intentions, but I could see and feel very plainly that I had only made their journeys more difficult. And I respected and loved them so much. And I had only made it more difficult for them, so I thought, oh man, I mean, you can, from that side, that everything is okay. Like you can see and feel, and you just know it's okay. Everything is okay. It's just like a big play. Everything's fine. But yet objectively, I could just see, oh my gosh, I've got a lot of fear. I got to do something about this. So so then they brought me this life after a time. I spent some time practicing surrendering to a veil in like a simulator. And then they brought me this life. And this life was not as optimum as the first one would have been, but it was pretty good. And it was like, it was good enough. It was good for the purposes. I just knew that it wasn't quite as optimal as the first one would have been. And I reviewed this life in incredible detail, like millions and millions of possibilities. It was like a flow chart. Language is so limiting here, okay? But it was like a vast flow chart of millions of branches, energetic branches. And it was like if you took a tree and laid it on its side and started at the trunk and worked your way out to the branches, it was like that, except these were probabilities, like there were paths that were more or less probable. And the thing that made them more or less probable and that could affect their outcome is free will, my choice making and the choice making of everybody else in the whole simulation. It was all a part of it. But there were certain energetic seasons and patterns happening. I could see and feel like the human race is going through a certain energetic pattern and my life would have a certain energetic pattern. And I knew that it was likely that a trauma would befall me in my 20s and crush me and give me the chance to re-experience that fear. And that did happen in this life. So I reviewed the life in detail. And then I once again, okay, so then I was in a waiting area. I remember the guide coming to me and saying, go now, like right now, you got to get on Earth time. And then being in this place, I can only describe like a technician's shop or like an auto shop, but it felt like it was up in space. There was this like shaft in the middle, or the Earth was below. And I remember these beings, I don't know if I call them guides or more like technicians or something, saying to me, are you sure? This is like the last chance button. You say yes here, you're strapped in for the ride kind of thing. And saying, yes, I'm ready. And then once again, feeling that incredible plummet of vibration down, 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 down lower still, more and more, and having all of my knowing be cut off and feeling dark and separate and alone. And I can't describe the density and simultaneous emptiness of this state of being by comparison. So I arrived here in the physical. I was just basically trying not to fight the veil this time because of what I experienced last time. And after just letting it be and letting it overcome me, eventually I sent a message back to the technicians. Did it take? Did the veil take? And they sent one message back, yes. So I knew I'd made it, which is like already a huge accomplishment. Like I knew even just making it here and being incarnated was like, oh, that's awesome. I made it. I made it. So I was here for a while, and then eventually I was like, you know what? I am not doing this. Once again, it was like, this is not happening. This is so dark. This is so low vibration. I have lost everything that I am. I am not doing this. And that fear rose up once again. And so I was preparing to fight my way out again when I had the most holy and beautiful moment of my life. I felt the great power, the great I am source of all that is, what we call God for for profound lack of term, come to me and expand me back out and show me all of the universe. And I felt it all within me, and I felt all the galaxies and all the stars, and I felt the churning of our sun, Earth's sun, and the bliss of being that the sun was, the churning bliss of being. And the spirit said to me, this is still what you are. You can never not be this. And I just knew it in my being. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's wonderful. I knew that I had nothing to fear. If this is still what I was, I hadn't lost everything that I was. Like that was what I was afraid of and rejecting, was this state of being in which I felt like I had lost all that I am. So that calmed me. I was, oh, okay, that's wonderful. And so I let go and settled back into the experience of being in the womb. And the next memory I have is of being born. I remember the shock, the brightness. I remember the cold. I remember being touched and just being overwhelmed with sense data, but having no idea what was going on. Just like, what is happening, but being super curious. I remember looking up at the nurses and wondering, who are these beings that are taking care of me? But just having absolutely no idea what was going on, and staring very intently and trying to analyze everything. I remember that. And it's funny because my father has told me that since I've shared the story. He said, oh yeah, your eyes were wide open. You were staring at that. I never saw such an intense gaze. And he said what occurred to him was, who is this being who has come, as a human? Because, to most people, they don't think of the idea that we pre-exist right before being physical. But I remember that curiosity and that intensity. And then not much after that. But then as I grew in the first few years of my life, I had memory of this. And that memory left me by the age of 5 or 6. But until that age, I assumed everybody knew we weren't from here. I just had this knowing, this sense, this is just a play. We're just coming to do a neat thing. Everybody must know it, but nobody talks about it. So I didn't talk about it. But I had certain assumptions that I carried with me that I assumed would be true here because of how things are in the higher realities. Just as an example, I remember feeling that it would make sense. It should be that people in positions of authority or leadership or teaching should be loving and wise.
Mhm.
So the higher you were in society, you must be a more loving and wise being. Well, that's not always how it works on earth. I have to remind myself of that. I feel like even today, I still am trying to come to terms fully with what this earth experience really is and where our society really is at. But anyway, so that's just, that's a short sharing of that story. I know people are interested to hear the story. I'm happy to share it, but I don't really think it's the most important thing that we can talk about, that we can share. I think what's far more important is to share with each other a reminder of who or what we really are.
Mm.
Everyone listening today, this is about, every one of us is on an incredible journey in the physical, and who we really are vastly transcends the physical context and the physical limitations. We are immortal beings of love. We are multidimensional, creative, powerful, loving beings. And that cannot be emphasized enough. We get super veiled while we're here. We get super dense. We don't see it in front of our faces every day. We're very associated with the form of Earth,
Yeah.
the visual experience, the shapes, the ideas, all the news, all the consumerism, all the food, and all the things. We're really deeply associated with that, but that's not what we really are. We really vastly transcend the story of the human condition. It's just a story that we embark upon for great purposes, for the purposes of the expansion of love and joy. It's a wonderful process.
Yes. Oh my gosh, Christian, thank you for sharing that story, first of all.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you brought that up about the beauty and the magnificence of what we are. People who watch my channel, if you've seen my videos, you understand that I've had experiences that have actually proven that. So it's not a faith thing about the magnificence of what we are. But one of the things that I've talked
Yeah.
about a lot is that I feel like the souls who choose to come to Earth, because I know it's not all souls are considered on the other side. We are looked at as like the daredevil souls of the universe, because
Yes.
so many souls will not take on that veil because it's unfathomable to be disconnected from what we are, which is not an experience of love. It is actually a state of being loved. So can you speak to that a little bit about the daredevil souls and how rare you feel it is on a soul level for souls to incarnate here on Earth?
Yes. No, I agree completely with what you just said. I don't know the prevalence. I couldn't put a number on it, obviously, but I do know that it is the minority of souls that would undertake something this extreme.
Hmm.
Because the state of being that we're in right now is extremely separate. Like we
Yeah.
feel separate.
Yeah.
We
We
actually
individuals.
made it. We made it all the way as far as we can take it into separation.
Right.
We've come so far that like the listeners today, probably whoever you are, you may assume we are separate people. That's just so, you know what I mean? These objects are separate. I got this object is so, but the thing is, that is just going very far in a certain extreme experiential direction. It's not really native to what we are. It's like putting on an astronaut suit or something and going into an extreme environment. Not everybody wants to go into space. You know, not everybody wants to wear an astronaut suit and go into space and get cramped
Right.
and maybe live on a space station for 3 years and eat food out of a tube, and you know what I mean? And poop in a
Yep.
bag or whatever. Not everybody wants to do that and go to outer space and
Yep.
do that. We did choose to do that. And it is the minority. So I agree. We are seen in a way like there's a near-death experiencer named Amy Call. I really love her NDE, fantastic NDE. And she says something to this effect that from the other side, we're seen as superheroes. And I think
That's
and then I
what
think
I
it was,
said.
and then
Yeah.
I think it was Natalie Sudman, actually, another near-death experiencer, who said that we're seeing like fighter jet pilots who, I think she said it was like flying a fighter jet upside down 30 feet above the ground, you know? Well, yes, I agree with that. And it's because the extremity of the limitation that we've agreed to experience here is so extreme. It's not everybody on Earth is going to go climb Mount Everest. No. I personally have no interest in attempting that level of difficulty. It may be like that a bit.
Yeah.
Now, you might say there's billions of people on Earth. Well, there are a lot of souls. I don't know how many souls, but it's far more than avatars available on Earth to play.
Definitely. Well, so then that's kind of an interesting thing also. So the population hasn't decreased over time, it's increased,
Yeah.
which means if we have multiple lives, everybody here couldn't have all had multiple lives. There haven't been that many people that have been on Earth. So one of the things that I was shown, and I'd love to hear your take on this, when I was on the other side, I was with a being who showed me the Earth, and the Earth looked very far away. And the being was explaining that the Earth is evolving and there's an evolution level, and and I'm going to put a percentage on it because it's only the way I can, again,
Sure.
words are really difficult, but 20% of the souls are very highly evolved souls that are here to kind of wake up the rest of the planet. And the other 80% are newer souls who have not had very many physical incarnations or coming here for the first time. And I think that it makes sense, and it's not an ego thing. Please do not mistake this for an ego thing, because it's easy when you talk about this to say, oh, so somebody who's here is better. There
No,
is
it's
no
not
good,
that.
better, or best on the other side. That doesn't exist. But would you agree that maybe a lot of the people who are on this planet right now are what you would refer to as newer souls, or souls who have not incarnated hundreds or thousands of times like some of the other souls?
I have no idea, but I would say that there are those who have a lot more experience, higher evolved souls who have come to help. I remember knowing on that side that the awakening was happening.
Can you talk to that a little bit? That's
Yeah,
really
so and
interesting.
like
and
that's
really
like kind of that's kind of like a new age term. I don't mean it like in any specific way, but it was just seen. Matter of fact, that human race is going through a huge change, and this is a very exciting time, but also a very challenging potentially time because of the amount of, so the collective consciousness of humanity has momentum to it. It has density. It's like thoughts are things in higher realms. So there's a huge amount of history that the human race has built up that's based around fear-based intention and fear-based ideas and beliefs. All the ego expressions of fear that we have kind of enshrined into our cultures and lifestyle. So, we have a lot of that momentum that's in there, and part of awakening has to do with rising our vibration in that we face that old momentum, we process it, we integrate it, and we allow ourselves to move closer and closer to our true nature, which is a true nature of love. So I don't know if I can guess what percentage have less experience. I don't like to refer to souls as new souls just because earthly
new to the
experience.
experience, new
Yeah,
to the
maybe new. Yeah,
experience.
absolutely. Because that's what I was going to say is the earth experience is just one type of experience. And in fact, our entire universe is just one. There's the context from which we come is huge, mind-bogglingly huge. And the earth is just one tiny little corner of our universe, but a very precious and high potential little corner. So much so that being given the opportunity to play a human is like a huge gift. It's like winning the lottery. I mean, that's kind of like the feeling, but it's like winning the lottery in a sense of feeling honored, actually. Like I felt honored that I was being given the opportunity to play a human life, in part because it meant that I completely agree. I don't want to make this sound like hierarchy or better or worse or
Right.
anything like that. It's not like that.
That's a challenge.
Yeah, it's hard to say it without making it sound like that. But it meant that, okay, that the guides, like in spirit, sees potential. Like it's seen that there is actually potential for me through this experience. You know what I mean? Because the system is very efficient, and so if you're allocated the opportunity to play a human life, it is an incredible gift. And it means that it's kind of anticipated that there may be a very fruitful potential for you and for others, if you have that experience. And that's true for all of us. We evolve, like it takes a certain level of skill, you could say, to even play a human. You know what I mean? Like not everybody, you don't go straight into college, you could say. You just don't. It's not going to be beneficial. It's not at all. But there may be those who have less experience in college or more, or I don't know, this metaphor has limits. But
Yeah.
anyway, I think you understand what I'm trying to communicate is that, yes, there is difference in level of experience within the souls that have come to Earth. And I do think it's probable that a large percentage of the Earth has yet to awaken to who we really are. But I think that's changing.
I think it's definitely changing. Can you go back and talk about the being that you encountered? Because this has always fascinated me. It seems unusual from my human perspective since I'm here and
Yeah.
all of us are here to even imagine that you could be traveling through the vastness of what exists outside of this place and you would come upon a being that had this quality of being physical, have encountered physical lives, but that you hadn't encountered that before on a soul level. So does that speak to the rarity of the fact that few souls have these incarnations?
I don't know. That may be an implication. I can't draw a direct inference there, but I do know that there was a moment at this point. I would even, again, not to use dualistic spectrums. I think we've disclaimed that enough, but I felt I was young. I was a young soul at that point, at that time. I did not have the level of experience. And this being, though, he did, and I was with a large group of beings in what I could describe as like a landscape of light, living light. And we were all moving together across this light. Some people have made fun of this word, but I like the word frolicking, like just bounding forward and expressing joy and exploring joy and creativity in a new way. And we were going to do something. I don't remember exactly what, but I remember there being many other beings. And this being, I remember he caught my attention because the quality of his vibration, his energy, his sound, even you could say, was unmistakable. It was like a brilliant golden light. I don't know how else to put it. So I won't draw any inferences too much from that, because then we're in linear time right now. So for us, and we're also in a place of discrete location. So we like to separate things. And that's how we understand things.
Right.
Generally difficult to do because our higher nature is very unified. All time is within the one now. So it's difficult to, to really draw too many inferences. But yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but that being was so inspiring there. It was a moment. I mean, it was one of those moments of I set a soul intention. Like as a spiritual being, I was like, I am going to do that. And it's funny because I've shared the story a number of times, and it was only after I shared it that I came across a Bob Monroe video a few years later, where I heard Bob Monroe. He's an out-of-body explorer who wrote a number of out-of-body books, and he founded the Monroe Institute. And I heard a video where he said most of us who come because we become inspired by a being who has come, and we see the potential expansion of being that is possible by coming. And when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, like I've never heard anybody say that like that. But that's exactly what I experienced. I was deeply inspired to do this. Yeah.
So then you talked about having, I'm going to call it a blueprint, and a blueprint may even simplify it, but I think that elicits a thought of what something could potentially look like.
Yeah.
But you said it was a living, breathing energy of millions of different choices that you could make, limited by free choice. But you likened it to a tree. So let's talk about the tree. So the tree starts
Mhm.
at a trunk, and then it has a couple of main branches. So are
Mhm.
you alluding to kind of how I believe is that you have certain things that you set aside for yourself that you are going to learn, that you want to experience and learn again? I hate to use that word
Yeah, the word learn, yeah.
more. Experience is, I think, a better word to use, but certain things that you've come here, you want to experience on this human plane. And so the trunk starts at these two or three branches.
Yeah.
And are those much more likely to happen or almost set into motion so that you can then experience some of the things that go into smaller branches and then into twigs and then into leaves? And does that also mean then that we have contracts with certain people? Because I believe that you can only truly learn about yourself through your experiences with others. If you were on a deserted island, you might learn that you were resourceful and you could survive, but you wouldn't learn a lot about yourself. It's through your interactions with other people that really help you learn and grow. So in order to do that, you almost have to contract with certain people that this person, if they come into my life, is going to help me elicit this experience. And this person, they all have free will. So that's why it may or may not happen. But do you believe that we have certain people that we are contracted, that it's almost like we couldn't help but meet them?
Yeah, so we do make prearrangements for the context. In my case, my intention for this life was not specific to a given individual because of the specificity of the vibration I am attempting to integrate. Like I know even now it's a living activity for me that I'm doing. So in my case, I knew that the parents would be very important because I knew that, for instance, my father would instill a certain confidence in me and that I needed that confidence in order to have a rock to stand on when the fear arose. And you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I knew that my mother would be very loving and that basically I would be loved. And that was like if I was going to go do this and meet this certain fear, like that had to not be a problem. Do you know what I mean? But to your question, I do feel that yes, we do make plans. We do make sometimes what we call soul contracts with others, depending on what we want to experience. I'm also careful about the word learn because learn implies an intellectual process.
Yeah.
I like to say we're not here for intellectual learning, though that's a part of it. We're here for a learning of the being something, by experiencing something. And so that prearrangement is like a context prearrangement. And you can arrange certain things in it. Like I asked certain questions. For instance, I asked, can I be intelligent again? Because I knew that I had been intelligent in several immediate preceding lives. And I wanted to retain that quality. I was like, I don't want to do a non-intelligent thing. I'm not doing that. Can I be intelligent? No, it wasn't like an egoic thing though. It was
Oh,
just like,
I
I
know.
don't
I'm just
prefer that.
laughing
It was
at it.
just, I don't prefer that. I prefer to, be enabled in that way. I mean, that's the best way I can put it. And they said, yes, you can do that. So I feel like that was worked in. But the main intention of facing this fear was intrinsically tied to a biological limitation that this body has that other bodies don't. And I actually knew that this body is an experience that other beings would probably pass up just because there was like a certain biological something missing that would make day-to-day experience difficult. And that was important. This sounds, like to the human from the human vantage point, we get up
Why
in
would
arms.
we?
We get
Yeah.
up in our ego is quick to defy and proclaim a righteous judgment. But in this case, I knew that from that perspective, that this limitation would basically, I don't want to use these words are bad, but keep me humble. Because basically I knew that it would make it difficult day to day in a way that I really wouldn't be able to go down an ego path because I would be suffering a lot. Now, I know that sounds, pain is good. That's not what I'm not communicating that pain is good. I'm just saying that from that perspective, I knew that this context had value and that through that limitation that I would experience day to day, that would it would support the likelihood, very probable outcome that I would be crushed and traumatized in my 20s. And the way that physically actualized was I tried to move to China after college. I tried to move to Beijing because I'd studied in Beijing in college. I tried to go to a jungle city called Chengdu. It was 110 degrees. I had a heat stroke. I spent 4 days in the Chinese hospital, and they gave me bag after bag of potassium. And something about that interacted with my biology in a certain way that caused an absolutely agonizing, terrible neurological pain, suffering that was just unrelenting and horrible. And I
Wow.
could not escape it. And it lasted for weeks and months. And it was just, I had post-traumatic stress after this experience for a number of years because it was so painful, and I locked it away. I couldn't even remember up until the age of 22, barely. Because that's just what happens with trauma. Your psyche's too big. I can't handle that. It's too big. I'll put that away in a corner. We're not going to deal with that. Well, through EMDR therapy and counseling and through a spiritual awakening, which actually happened as a result of this, really, I think, I went and I faced that. I found that fear. And that fear was not just originating in that hospital bed in Chengdu. It was from before. It was this deep, low vibration, this staggeringly low vibration that in the past had bested me. And here I am now facing it. Even now, as I talk about it, seeing it, feeling it, it's okay. And I knew that the context, this limitation set, would enable that opportunity. It's not about suffering. It's not about signing up for suffering. It's about signing up for the context for an opportunity, to have the
Mhm.
opportunity. That's a huge distinction. It's an important distinction. As people who are suffering so much and who reject so much of
Yes.
our lives, it's not like we're masochists. It's not like we come because we want pain. It's just that contrast is a very useful tool. And this is a high contrast simulation, and therefore a high opportunity simulation.
So
So
the
back to
opportunity
yeah.
is to overcome the fear. Is that one of the biggest opportunities we have in taking on these roles and experiencing that duality of what we are, which is love, right? And
Yes.
so the
Yes.
opposite of that would be fear and lower vibration, right?
Yes. So love is what we really are always.
Mhm.
Everything that we are doing ultimately comes from love and returns to love. Everything.
Christian, thank you so much. It has been an honor to talk to you. I appreciate your time so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Next up, check out this playlist of other NDE interviews. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to grow so I can bring you more content. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here.